Okay, so really quick, I did grade your unit circle quizzes, and I put them in Harmony. If you did not get a grade that you are happy with, don't worry, you can retake it. You can even retake it on Monday. And some of you just made some easy mistakes that you can fix, and so don't stress too much about it, and we can talk about it on Monday. But overall, they went really well, which is a good thing because we have to know the unit circle in order to be able to graph. So I want to do a little overview really quick. Hopefully this video will be about 5 minutes about what these graphs look like. So sine is an odd function, and so when you graph sine, you always want to graph 5 points. And so I'm not going to label these again. This is on the original one that you did already, but I just want to kind of show you the basic shape of sine. At 0, because the sine is the y coordinate, at 0, sine is 0. It goes up to its maximum height. It goes back to 0 if this was at pi, right? Ending at 2 pi. It goes down to its lowest height and then back to 0. So I always say it goes like one hump up, one hump down. And that is what we call a complete period because it's all the way around the unit circle. Because it's an odd function, it goes exactly the opposite way the other way. So again, I'm going to go over this. So if I start at 0 and I go up first here, that means going backwards or going to negative, I'm going to go down first because it's odd. So now I'm going to go down first, back to the middle, up next because it's the opposite of this one, and then back in the middle. So on the negative side, it goes down first and then back up. So, and it just completes this. It just repeats it over and over again. So the other part is like it should be a pattern. So that's another way to look at it. Cosine is an even function. So if we do the same thing on cosine, which again, hopefully you wrote this in your video, for cosine is the x value. So at 0, right, on the unit circle, at 0, the cosine is 1. So I start up here at 1, and I go down at pi halves to 0. At pi, it's at -1, back up, and back up. And so cosine, one full time around the circle, looks something like this. Because cosine is an even function, if we go the negative way, like clockwise, we get the exact same thing because pi halves is still at 0. And negative pi is the same as positive pi. So when you graph cosine, you get the exact same thing on both sides, and it kind of looks like a W when you graph it. Okay? So that's what I mean by using key points, points that give you 0, 1, or -1. So I asked you to think about what happens if you add or subtract a number. Well, transformation-wise, that's just a vertical shift. And so one thing you can always do is you can pick the points on the unit circle that work out really nice. These are what I call key points. 0, pi halves, pi, 3 pi halves, and 2 pi. Those are the points that are 1s and 0s on your unit circle. So they give you really nice answers. And all you're going to do is add 2 to each of those numbers. So normally at 0, the y value is 0, and 0 plus 2 is 2. Normally at pi halves, the y value is 1. So 2 plus 1 is 3. At pi, I'm back to 0. So 0 plus 2 is still 2. At 3 pi halves, I'm at -1. So 2 plus -1 is 1. And we should always end, 2 pi is the same as 0. Those should always be the same number. So let me show you what this kind of looks like and see what you think about it. So you got to make sure you label your x-axis because your x-axis is now going by angles. If you don't label your y-axis, I read it as 1. So make sure you do it label it if it goes by something other than 1s. But if I graph this at 0 now, I'm normally at 0, but I moved it up 2. So all these numbers are just moved up 2. So now it goes up to 3. At pi, it goes back to 2. At 3 pi halves, it goes up to 1. And at 2 pi, it goes back to 2. And think about it. You don't have to draw this part in. But think about, normally we use the x-axis as that center line. That this is kind of now your center line. And look, we go one hump up, one hump down. And if I go on the other side, it's odd, so I'm going to go the opposite. So since I went up here first, now I'm going to go down first to 1, and then I'm going to go back to 2, and then I'm going to go up to 3, and I'm going to go back without having to pick the points. And again, look at this. It should be a smooth curve following a pattern with a max and a min value on that. And the same thing on cosine. If I graph this, I don't know why I didn't give you a graph on this one, but I didn't. I'm going to label that first. Because it's -3, I know I'm going to have to go negatively, so I'm going to make a lot of negative values. And again, you can always pick your points, 0 to 2 pi, halfway in the middle, and halfway in the middle of those. And you can plug them in. Cosine is the x-coordinate. So at 0, cosine is 1, and 1 minus 3 is -2. At pi halves, that's up here. The x value is 0, and 0 minus 3 is -3. At pi, the cosine, or the x, is -1 minus 3 is -4. And at 3 pi halves, I'm back to 0, which is -3. And again, just like sine, we should end back where we start because we end back over here at -2. This is an even function. So when I'm done, it should look like a W. So at 0, it goes down to -2. At pi halves, it goes to -3. At pi, it goes to -4. Then it goes back to -3 and down to -2. And it looks sort of like this. And I could plug in these negative angles, but because it's an even functions are reflected over the y-axis. So it's exactly the same graph on both sides when I do this, right? Back to here and then up like this. One thing I'll say, and I'm pretty sure I said in the video, cosine, this graph will never get higher than -2 because at 0 and 2 pi, that's the biggest cosine ever is when it's 1. So you got to make sure you turn your arrows back down when you're doing this, okay? So you're only doing these 2 questions, and you can pause the video to write them down. I've left a graph paper here on the stool sitting here, so if you want graph paper so your squares are evenly spaced, you can get them, or you can just draw it on your own paper. When you're done with this, there's a video for Monday talking about graphing tangent and cotangent. You can also get out that Unit 1 packet and see if there's any that you can do on it if you want to do that as well. But make sure you graph these first. 2 full periods means go from -2 pi to 2 pi on your graph, okay?